And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day despite the fact that there is not such great news concerning the cost of the war in Iran. That cost, according to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, suggests that we have spent $37.5 billion so far. But most experts think that is an estimate way too low. We will get to that. We'll also be speaking about an end to the war. Or is this a long-term quagmire? Or are we simply stuck there for the foreseeable future? We'll be speaking to four-star U.S. Army General, retired Barry McCaffrey, a favorite guest of this show. And him talking about what the cost of a ground invasion would be, and that cost may be necessary to pay in human terms, in economic terms, in diplomatic terms, because it could be the only way to end a war with the two main goals achieved. One, making sure that Iran does not have any nuclear power, and number two, getting rid of their attempt to control the Strait of Hormuz. What's shocking is they didn't control the Strait of Hormuz at all before the war. So given the fact that the war has so far added to the Iranian power, is it time to reconsider what we're trying to do and how to do it? We'll be speaking coming up to General McCaffrey on that subject. Meanwhile, somebody else with not quite the same military sophistication and background, Donald Trump, threatened today to bomb and destroy an Iranian bridge or power plant for every new attack by Iran on a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Is that going to get the Strait of Hormuz free again with navigation unimpeded? It's very doubtful. After an 11th night of strikes on Iran, that's 11 nights in a row, the U.S. military insisted that the Strait of Hormuz remains open. But Iran continues attacking ships in the strait, as well as the Gulf states, our allies, while its Houthi allies now are threatening the Middle East's other shipping gateway, the Bab el-Mandab Strait, fueling a sharp rise in oil prices over the last 2 weeks. That's not good news for the United States or for average Americans who are trying to live their lives and get gas occasionally. President Trump attended a dignified transfer today for U.S. forces killed in Iranian strikes in recent days. In total, 18 U.S. service members have been killed since the start of the war. Meanwhile, the Washington Post and CNBC both published polls with double-digit negative net ratings for President Trump. In the Washington Post poll, he reached his second lowest net rating ever for the pollster at negative 24 points. In other words, you are, as an American, 24% more likely to be negative about Donald Trump than to be positive in any way about approving of his performance. For CNBC, Trump reached his all-time low in its polls with a net rating of minus 19. The surveys published this month come as the war with Iran lingers, despite several promises by the president that an end is close at hand, and as Americans continue to struggle through an affordability crisis. There's more disturbing news. The U.S. measles case count for this year has surged past last year's total and now stands at 2,295, a level that hasn't been seen in 35 years. In other words, measles, which can be fatal, are more common and more widespread and at a higher rate of incidence than any time in 35 years, than in a full generation. That, according to a Johns Hopkins University tracking study that compiles state and local health data. It's the latest sign that the virus is rebounding in areas with what? With low vaccine coverage, threatening the United States measles elimination status, which is due to be reviewed in November. The big picture, the majority of cases, overwhelming majority of cases that have been diagnosed so far are in unvaccinated people. These vaccinations work regardless of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says. While overall measles vaccination rates are still relatively high, public health officials say they must remain above 95% to maintain what they call herd immunity. Meanwhile, there is this. The Dispatch reports that the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, visited the White House yesterday for a meeting with President Donald J. Trump, the first such visit by a sitting president of Lebanon since 2009. It's a long time. Trump pledged U.S. support for ongoing peace talks between Lebanon and Israel, currently being mediated by the U.S. The two countries first announced a framework deal for a planned Israeli withdrawal of its forces from southern Lebanon near the border with Israel. Those forces would be withdrawn, at least according to the framework, in June, after attacks by Hezbollah prompted a renewed Israeli ground offensive earlier this year. The withdrawal was conditioned on the Lebanese armed forces taking control of the area from the Iranian-backed Shiite terror group, which has controlled the southern part of the country, of the nation of Lebanon, for decades, and used it as a base from which to attack Israel. And meanwhile, President Trump had very good things to say about the current administration in Lebanon and the president, Joseph Aoun, and said that we would give a lot of help to Lebanon. But meanwhile, what about the help for the United States in dealing with the ongoing war in Iran? And the Financial Times reports Trump is slipping into an Iran quagmire. America cannot achieve its aims by negotiation alone. So regime change is back on the agenda. And how does that regime change get implemented? How does it become a reality? And again, General Barry McCaffrey has written briefly. He is now a security analyst, but a 4-star Army general, retired, with a remarkably distinguished record and a great deal of perspicacity when it comes to analyzing the military situation right now. We'll be right back on The Medved Show.
The Medved Show, michaelmedved.com.
And the latest developments from Iran and vicinity. Fox News is reporting through reporter Steve Harrigan about the latest Iranian attack on a Kuwaiti tanker and a desalinization plant, and the indication that Iran would actually welcome a ground fight with America. This alarming news reported on Fox Clip 14.
CENTCOM letting the world know that those strikes took place again, U.S. attacks against Iran. This is the 11th straight night. Those attacks lasted more than 1 hour. Once again, the goal to limit or reduce the efforts of Iran to harass, target, and disable shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That's CENTCOM's goal. Iran, on the other hand, has managed to disable yet another tanker, a Kuwaiti tanker, off the coast of Oman in that strait. Also, Iran hitting a Kuwaiti desalination plant, once again targeting the infrastructure of allies close to the U.S. in the region. As far as diplomatic efforts go, no sign of any progress, just the reverse. Both sides talking about a potential ratcheting up of events. Today, President Tuff talking tough inside the White House, saying the U.S. has been nice to Iran so far, but there are much more options on the table, more severe ones for the U.S. As for Iran, the foreign ministry spokesman talking about the possibility of a threat of an invasion by the U.S. into Iran, saying many people in Iran are counting down the moments to such an opportunity, welcoming a ground fight with the U.S.
Are they really welcoming a ground fight with the U.S.? Or is that simply a way to increase national morale? President Trump in the Oval Office acknowledged that despite all of the damage we have done to their armed forces, particularly their Navy and their Air Force, such as it is, the Iranians gained some unexpected success attacking Jordan, our close ally. This is President Trump from the Oval Office today. This is clip 9.
We are doing very well. We are degrading them at levels that nobody thought was possible. They're being degraded really so seriously. They did slip something through in Jordan, and if we had other operators, would not happened, unfortunately. But because we have the best equipment in the world, we've stopped almost everything. But when you let other people do your job, with the United States, we let other people do the job, and sometimes it doesn't work out so well. But we're going to be going and paying our respects at Dover.
Okay, the respects at Dover. He is going to be there for what they call a dignified transfer of the remains of service members who have given their lives in this problematic war. And when he says they slipped something through, has he been watching too much World Cup soccer? I mean, you would hope that there would be goalies who could block any damaging attempt to ruin a desalinization plant, which people depend on for drinking water and other needs. And this is a desalinization plant in Kuwait. Again, an American ally that had put its trust in our protection. President Trump went on to say this as he departed for the dignified transfer ceremony honoring the service members killed in the Iran conflict. This is clip 13.
Well, Americans aren't against the war. A poll just came out. Americans don't want high gasoline prices, but they're not against the war. That just came out loud and clear in a poll. Nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Do you want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Do you think it's good?
Okay. By the way, I think he's right about that people don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But are Americans willing or eager to go to war and to go to an extended war with that cause in mind? I think the most Americans would want some effective check on Iran's nuclear program. but not a major ground invasion and not something that continues to damage the U.S. economy. Senator Gary Peters, outgoing senator from Michigan, Democrat, was doing a back and forth with Pete Hegseth, some Senate hearings concerning the war in Iran on Capitol Hill. Senator Peters, then Pete Hegseth, clip 20.
You talk about the destruction of missiles, and yet the missiles that we saw hit recent targets are actually somehow more lethal, more deadly, more maneuverable than what we have seen in the past. So they're obviously improving their munitions. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed, reminding everybody it was open before the war. Prices were lower for everybody until the war, and it still remains closed. And of course, tragically, people, service members, our warfighters who we care deeply about, are still dying. So what's different, Mr. Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth?
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter. Either you do or you don't.
Is the nuclear material still there,
I
sir?
can get you a ticket out to CENTCOM and talk to what those Americans are doing and how committed they are to this effort and how they want to ensure that Iran never threatens their families with a nuclear weapon. That's the kind of intensity that our warfighters have about making sure that Iran isn't capable of.
And the exchange between Senator Peters and Secretary of War Hegseth got only more warlike and combative coming from that point. We will be providing more, plus conversation with General Barry McCaffrey, who is warning that it now appears that the only potential solution for the United States to a successful outcome in this war would involve a very major ground invasion, something that is emphatically not popular among the American public at large. We will be speaking with General McCaffrey coming up on the Medved Show.
Listeners love Michael Medved.
I listen to you occasionally when I'm driving. It turns my stomach every time I do.
Lately, you've been sounding like a raving lunatic. You upset me so much. You never tell the truth.
I truly believe you're delusional.
You don't have a clue.
You're wrong again.
What's going on in your head? You are no good for the country.
People like you who are a monster. Have you no shame?
The Michael Medved Show. Entertain your brain.
Just sit back and enjoy the show.
Every day on The Michael Medved Show.
And it is always an honor to welcome to our show General Barry R. McCaffrey. He is a 4-star Army general, retired, 4 combat tours, 3 Purple Heart Awards for the wounds that he sustained in combat. And he's active in the Council on Foreign Relations and a part of the JCS strategic plans and with NATO in Brussels. His most recent ex-post, Mr. Trump has gotten the U.S. into a quagmire. There is no way to open the Strait of Hormuz without a major intervention with U.S. ground forces. General McCaffrey, you're estimating that it would take 600,000 forces to do the job, to get the job done in Iran?
Well, look, let me start by just saying that it's a perilous situation we're in, because essentially the Iranians are in a desperate economic situation, absolutely desperate. The currency inflation is astonishing. The oil output is de minimis. They're militarily dominated by the U.S. There's no question of that. We have total air dominance over the country, both naval and U.S. Air Force power. But at the same time, the strait is closed. It's subject to attack by cheap drones from 100 miles inland in Iran. So if you want to stop all threats to shipping moving through slow-paced giant oil tankers, you'd really have to use ground forces to get into Iran. Not 600,000, I don't know where that came from. Just a back-of-the-envelope analysis, it'd be a reinforced core at a minimum, maybe 150,000 troops. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And to what end? I mean, once you got in there, do you stay for the next 20 years? So he's really stuck. He's going to escalate with economic targets and hope that that cracks the Iranians and brings them back to the negotiating table. But, you know, Michael, when you think about the so-called memorandum of understanding, Iran should have grabbed that and said the war's over. It was a total surrender to their demands. They didn't, so now they're rubbing Mr. Trump's nose in it. It's an astonishing situation.
And the adding of the Houthi forces, that makes it even less likely that because they're attacking Bar al-Mandab as well in the Red Sea, doesn't the Houthi joining this war with so much enthusiasm indicate that this is not going to be over anytime soon?
Well, certainly it's an incredible threat. You know, the sort of standard thumbnail sketch says 20% of the global oil comes out through the Strait of Hormuz, and 7% came out through Saudi pipelines to the Red Sea and then south and out to the Asian markets. But the Houthis are, you know, if it wasn't so deadly serious and frightening to the global economy, they're sort of a comical lot. They despise the Saudis more than Israel. It's not clear to me, by the way, that they're going to actually attack shipping in the Red Sea. 2 tankers just turned around and went back up toward the Suez Canal yesterday, which was an indication to the oil markets that the potential is right there. But it's hard to know what the Houthis are going to do or what we would do in response. I mean, we fought a war against them at sea. The wonderful U.S. Navy got into the Red Sea and hammered the Houthis, but they never really stopped it. So air power alone can't stop ground power from taking action.
Is there any chance coming up that the original prediction, the original expectation, goal of the Trump administration seemed to be for regime change? Regime change likely in Iran?
No, I think not. You know, that initial strike by the Israelis and the U.S., which took out a couple of hundred of their most senior political and military leaders and the theological head of the country, was a brilliant coup de force. It was astonishing intelligence triumph. But essentially, you just take the top leaders and destroy them, and the more energetic 50-year-olds then take over. That regime is despotic. At least 80% of the Iranian people, we believe, do not support the government. But the government killed maybe 40,000 of them, murdered them in the streets with automatic weapons. So there's zero chance, in my view, in the short run, of a regime change. These people are not objective, logical. The whole cult of the IRGC, the elite forces that keep the regime in power, has been hatred for 47 years of the Jews and the U.S. Death to Israel, death to the United States. I don't see how this changes for the better. And by the way, the new supreme leader, we're not quite sure whether he's in charge or not. He's apparently badly injured, probably still giving legitimacy to the government. But why would he negotiate with us? Who killed his dad and his mom and his sister? And it's just an astonishing misreading of the Iraqis, of the Iranians. They took 200,000 dead fighting the Iraqis in a 7-year war. There's no reason why we should expect them to fold the towel now.
Okay, with them not throwing in the towel, what does this say for the future of Oh, things like the Abraham Accords and our allies in the region, with attacks on Jordan and Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. What happens to the U.S.'s attempt to build a new Middle East?
You know, it's interesting. There's such polarization in U.S. politics at the envelope. The Abraham Accords are a brilliant concept. It was astonishing that Trump won version 1, pulled that off, Jared Kushner being the lead negotiator. It actually is moving in the right direction. But now we're in a position where, first of all, none of the Gulf Coast states or Saudi Arabia trust the U.S., period. They know Mr. Trump's trying to get out of this war desperately. He'll throw them under the bus, so to speak, in a flash. It turned out that our 50,000 troops that were there anyway and more than 35 U.S. military installations are extremely vulnerable to these cheap drone attacks. Small warheads, small, a couple of 100 kilograms. They can be targeted to land dead on a target. So those bases are now in some peril. And by the way, thank God for the United States Navy. We've got 2 carrier battle groups, but they're out a couple of 100 miles at sea. They have incredible self-defense capabilities. So I think our permanent basing in the Middle East is under threat, and those Gulf Coast allies are trying to escape the scene.
And President Trump insists that the war is more popular than is often portrayed. Very quickly, your sensibility on that?
Mr. Trump went into this war with no support from Congress, the American people, nor our allies. Not just the Gulf Coast allies. Europe almost uniformly walked away from him. We're in trouble.
And that is one of those things that we need guidance from people like General McCaffrey, whose most recent commentaries are posted at our website at michaelmedved.com. Godspeed to you, sir, as always, and let's look forward to more encouraging news as it develops. Coming up, more about the confrontation between the Secretary of War and the U.S. Senate, coming up on the Medved Show.
Medved.
And on the Michael Medved Show, part of the big news was the testimony by the Secretary of Defense. He prefers to be called the Secretary of War. Pete Hegseth said the war with Iran has cost $37.5 billion so far, but experts told CNN the price tag is likely much higher. How much higher? Well, the war is still happening. It's still in progress. It's still costing money. Meanwhile, the U.S. military said it conducted the 11th consecutive night of strikes against Iran last night. President Donald Trump said the U.S. will likely soon hit the area of Pickaxe Mountain, a suspected underground Iranian nuclear facility. Another indication that their nuclear program has been damaged, thank God, but it unfortunately has not been obliterated as the administration claimed. Tehran said an attack on the site would expand the war in the region. Amazing. And meanwhile, the testimony by Pete Hegseth in front of the Senate Appropriations Committee became a very pointed and combative exchange between Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, a Democrat, and Secretary Hegseth. It sounded like this, clip 19.
Secretary Hegseth, if you listen to my comments, you would have heard me say how amazing our warfighters are.
I heard failure. I heard exactly what you said.
I will tell you how I use the word failure, because I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure, not the men and women who are on that front line, not the men and women who hold up their honor with distinction. But if there's a lack of a winning strategy, they're in harm's way. Their leaders have failed them. And that's what's happening. We have political leadership. You don't have a strategy. You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership. When will you show leadership? When will you show
leadership? Why don't you show some leadership and stand up to your fellow Democrats who won't fund the troops, who stand and play partisan politics while you don't give us the money? You want to stand up here and talk about the troops? You won't show any political courage to actually fund our department because you have Trump derangement syndrome and can't actually commit to anything meaningful. So I put this on you, Senator.
Secretary Hegseth, you have trillions, you have over $1 trillion. You're asking for $1.5 trillion. It's not a question of money. It's a question of leadership and understanding what it takes to actually win.
Political cowardice of Democrats who won't fund the troops.
Okay. And the exchanges continued, not just between Senator Peters and Secretary Hegseth, but between Secretary Hegseth and another Democrat, a rising Democrat, John Ossoff of Georgia. He sparred with Hegseth over claims of previous claims of overwhelming victory in Iran. This is clip 18.
You said Iran's military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come. And you stated we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Were those accurate statements?
It certainly was, on behalf of the men and women in uniform, a historic military victory over Iran.
Had Iran's military been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come? That was a statement that you made 4 months ago.
They had 160 naval vessels.
You need to answer the questions, Mr. Secretary.
Their Air Force is 4 months ago, combat ineffective, and they don't have a defense industrial base.
Excuse me,
describe
Mr.
to me a country that doesn't have an Air Force, a Navy, or a defense industrial base,
Mr.
and I will describe
Secretary,
to you a country that does not have an effective
Mr.
military.
Secretary, you stated,
it can lob missiles.
Mr. Secretary, you stated 4 months ago that Iran's military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come. Has Iran's military been for the last 4 months combat ineffective?
It's been set back not just years, but likely decades.
You stated we had, quote,
build at the level it did before, not even close. It doesn't mean it doesn't have capabilities.
Mr. Secretary, you stated we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Was that an accurate statement 4 months ago?
The main objective of this was to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear.
Okay, it went back and forth. And then Secretary Hegseth, later in his testimony, tried to get the last word by somehow comparing the support for Ukraine with the attack on Iran. This is Secretary Hegseth again, clip 12.
Sometimes we forget recent history, which under the Biden administration, there were 5 supplemental requests for Ukraine, which almost every member of this body voted for to send rapidly in a bipartisan fashion for something that this committee and the administration deemed to be urgent. President Trump may take a different view, but that was the view of the Biden administration.
And real quick, when you say it would be urgent to make sure that our men and women in uniform right now have everything that they need?
I would argue providing for American men and women as opposed to Ukrainian men and women is a higher priority for the United States Senate. So 5 supplementals that went to Ukraine, as good as that cause may be, why is that righteous to do? But funding troops in harm's way right now, given the threat and what they're undertaking, this is a partisan exercise.
And so
it's hypocrisy.
Mr.
And I appreciate
Secretary,
you pointing it out.
The continued back and forth has to do with, is there any realistic chance for a negotiated settlement? And that was addressed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was traveling in the Philippines. And he said that Iran somehow is still not serious about reaching a deal. This is clip 16. Secretary of State.
We remain
Marco
open to
Rubio.
diplomacy. We remain open to working it out in a negotiated way. But right now, they don't seem to be serious about that. And so we're going to continue to protect shipping. We think other countries should join us in that endeavor. We don't need them to, but they should, because they're more impacted by it than we are. And at the same time, we are going to, when the opportunity presents itself, degrade their ability to target global shipping.
Okay, one of the things that you see, even in this brief excerpt here, is why so many people have commented, and I think it is an accurate comment, that Secretary Rubio is a far more effective spokesman on behalf of our current war effort than Secretary Hegseth or than President Trump himself. And certainly there's more effectiveness and trustworthiness from Marco Rubio than you get from Stephen Miller, who basically comes back to that claim that the war is already won. This is clip 11.
President Trump is the only American president who's had the courage and the foresight and the willingness to take this threat head on and to say, we're not going to shove it aside. We're not going to let this threat go. We're not going to wake up in a morning where Iran has a nuclear weapon and the capacity to use it against American citizens. We're going to deal with this here. We're going to deal with it now, and we're going to do whatever it takes. And the results have been very clear. The regime has been eviscerated militarily, financially, politically, in every possible way. And that off-ramp's there anytime they want it to make a deal and to honor and abide by that deal. But if they think they can cross America and get away with it, they and everyone watching around the world is learning a very clear lesson about America and President Trump, Sean.
Okay, the lesson put forward by Stephen Miller, basically contradicting the evidence of continued effectiveness on the part of the Iranians. There's actually an editorial in the Wall Street Journal that is actually disturbing because it talks about Iran's fortitude as its decisive edge. And we will get to that coming up on the Medved Show. Tehran has a wartime advantage over Washington. Why? Because the ruling Iranian elite wants to fight and has been willing to endure far more pain than Donald Trump has, or the American people appear to be expressing. We will get to that. We will also get to the big primary election in Arizona yesterday, where there were some victories for President Trump and some defeats, one particularly dramatic defeat for the Democratic left that had been doing so well across the country. Not in Arizona, not this time. We will get to that and to a new polling state by state that takes a look at a surprise point in common for all the swing states in this greatest nation on God's green earth.